I woke up to the sound of something slamming against the door. Not a knock, a slam. I shot up on the cot, heart pounding like I'd just been yanked out of a nightmare. But this wasn't a dream. The wind was howling outside like a wounded animal, and rain hit the tin roof so hard I thought it might cave in. For a second I froze. Then it came again. Thud. The whole door shook. There shouldn't be anyone here. Not this far out. The closest neighbor was miles away. I didn't even have a road leading to this place anymore. Just a muddy trail that disappeared when it rained like this. I grabbed the hunting knife I kept under my pillow. Not a gun. I sold that when I needed gas money last winter. The power was long gone. I lit the oil lamp, its weak yellow glow flickering across the wooden walls of the old shed I called home now. I moved slowly toward the door, my boots squishing in the damp floorboards. My gut was screaming not to open it, but I had to know. Another slam. "Hey," I yelled, voice cracking. "Who's there?" No answer, just heavy breathing. Then something brushed the side of the wall. Whatever it was big, real big. I cracked the door open an inch, knife in my right hand. The wind tried to rip it from my grip. I squinted into the dark, and for a moment, I saw nothing but sheets of rain. Then it moved. Two eyes, reflecting amber in the lamplight. Low, wide, and a shape behind them like a boulder that breathed. I knew that silhouette. A black bear. But it wasn't charging. It was leaning, slumped almost. It took a step, staggered sideways, and then collapsed right against the door, forcing it open with its weight. I stumbled back. The knife clattered to the floor. The bear was in. I should have run. Should have screamed. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed. It lay on its side, panting. Water dripped from its fur. Blood too, I realized. A slow trickle down its front leg. I could smell it. For what felt like minutes, I didn't move. Neither did it. The bear didn't growl. Didn't snarl. It just lay there, wheezing, eyes half closed. Dying maybe? Or playing possum. I didn't know. My heart slowed just enough for me to pick up the knife again. I held it out in front of me as I stepped around the room, keeping distance. My eyes never left the bear. I should tell you something. I'm not a woodsman. I used to teach math at a high school before everything fell apart. Divorce. Bankruptcy. Then the fire that took everything else. This shed was my last option. It belonged to my grandfather. No plumbing. No heat. But it had walls. That was enough. Now I had a full-grown bear bleeding on the floor. I sat on the edge of the cot, knife still in hand, watching it breathe. Hours passed. The storm kept raging. The lamp sputtered. I wrapped myself in the only dry blanket I had. I should have forced it out, killed it even, but I didn't. You ever reach a point where you just stop caring whether you live or die? That's where I was. Maybe that's why I let it stay. By morning, the rain slowed. Light filtered through the cracks in the wood, turning everything a dull gray. The bear was still there, still breathing, but it hadn't moved. I took a step closer. It opened one eye. I froze. Its gaze locked with mine. Not aggressive, not afraid, just tired. And for some reason, I saw myself in it. Beaten down, alone, breathing just because that's all that was left to do. I don't know what possessed me, but I set the knife down. Then I grabbed a piece of leftover bread from the table and placed it a few feet away from its nose. I returned to the cot, watched, waited. The bear didn't touch it, but it didn't attack me either. That was the first night I shared a roof with something wild. I didn't know then it was only the beginning, and that what came next would change everything I believed about life, about trust, and about God. But that night, all I knew was this. Neither of us had anywhere else to go. The next morning, I woke up stiff and sore, still on the edge of the cot, boots half off, knife untouched on the floor. For a split second, I thought maybe the night had been a dream, some twisted hallucination brought on by loneliness and cold. But when I turned my head, he was still there. The black bear hadn't moved much. His breathing was slower, but steady. His body rose and fell like a bellows. Water had dried in the fur, leaving matted patches and mud trails across the wooden floor. He hadn't touched the bread I left near his nose. I stayed quiet, barely breathing, just watching him. I don't know why, but I started counting the seconds between each breath. Maybe it gave me something to do besides panic. I was waiting for him to snap out of it and maul me. It never happened. Instead, the silence stretched. I stood up slowly, limbs aching, and moved to the small wash basin by the window. I splashed some of the rainwater over my face. The sting of cold helped clear the fog in my head. I looked back. Still there. Why hadn't he left? I pulled on my jacket, walked over to the far side of the shed where a crate sat with old supplies. I rummaged through until I found a small can of tuna, the last one. I opened it with my knife and pushed it gently toward him across the floor with a stick. He didn't react. Then I noticed something. His left front leg, just above the paw, was swollen. The fur there was darker, clumped. Blood had dried into the wound. I couldn't see what caused it, but it looked bad. He was hurt. I sat back down, thinking. I hadn't thought about animals much since I was a kid. My dad used to bring home stray dogs. He said, anyone can kill, but only a few can fix what's broken. I remembered one summer when we found a raccoon trapped in a fence wire. It took us 2 hours to get it free. My hands were shredded, but we saved it. That raccoon used to come back every week for a year. Looking at this bear, I felt something strange stirring inside. Not fear. Not exactly sympathy either. It was like recognition. We were both broken in ways that didn't show right away. Around noon, I stepped outside. The air smelled of wet pine and soil. The storm had passed, but everything dripped. My boots sank into the mud with every step. I fetched a bucket of cleaner rainwater and came back in. The bear lifted his head, just a little. His eyes tracked me. My chest tightened, but I didn't run. I knelt on the other side of the room and placed the bucket within his view, then backed away. He didn't move. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the shed. I needed something to focus on. I straightened the shelves, folded what little clothing I had, wiped the floor near the door, all while keeping him in my peripheral vision. Sometimes he watched me. Sometimes he dozed. By evening, I was exhausted again. It was a different kind of tired, though. Not the soul-crushing kind that made you want to disappear. This was something closer to purpose. I sat on the floor, leaned back against the cot, and looked at him. Why are you still here? Why didn't you run back into the woods like everything else that wants to live? Why didn't you kill me when you had the chance? What the hell are we doing? No answers, of course. Just that deep, labored breathing. Around midnight, I jolted awake to a thud. The bear was up. I held my breath as he staggered to his feet. His left leg gave out, and he fell back down with a groan that rattled the walls. He tried again, stood, wobbled. Then, he turned, slowly, and limped toward the door. I stood up too, unsure whether to open it or not. But he didn't look at me. He nudged the door with his snout. I stepped forward and unlatched it. He paused, looked at me, for real this time. Not as a threat, not as prey, just eye to eye. And then he was gone. He vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the trees. I stood there for a while, wind licking at my face, wondering if I'd ever see him again, wondering if I should have done more. But before I could shut the door, I heard it. From deep in the woods. A roar. Not an angry one. Not even loud. But it echoed in my bones. Something about it told me this wasn't the end. I barely slept after hearing that roar. Not because it was terrifying, though it should have been, but because it sounded lonely. Like someone calling out into the dark, not expecting an answer. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on my jacket, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped out into the misty woods. The air was damp, heavy, full of that spring smell, wet bark, moss, and something deeper, almost metallic. I scanned the ground near the shed. The mud still held deep impressions, massive paw prints, dragging slightly. He was hurt worse than I'd thought. I followed the trail. It weaved between trees, circled a fallen log, then veered into denser brush. The branches clawed at my clothes. Water dripped from every needle and leaf, soaking through within minutes. I kept walking. Something in me refused to turn back. It wasn't just about the bear anymore. It was about everything I hadn't faced in months. Grief, guilt, that terrible weight of surviving when others didn't. A crow cried overhead. Then I heard it. A low grunt. I froze, clicked off the flashlight, listened. Another grunt, followed by a rustle, something heavy shifting against leaves and twigs. I moved slowly now, each step deliberate. The trail ended in a shallow ravine, shaded by tall pines. And there he was. He'd collapsed beside a pile of rocks. His body curled in on itself, and his front leg, his injured leg, was caught in something. I moved closer, and my stomach dropped. It was a trap, a rusted steel-jawed relic from another time, half buried in the dirt. Someone must have set it years ago and left it. Now it had him. His chest rose and fell fast, eyes wild with pain. When he saw me, he didn't growl, just stared. I crouched a few feet away. "Damn it," I whispered. "You idiot. Why didn't you just stay?" He shifted, trying to move. The trap clanked, and he let out a sound that was more agony than anything else. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to leave. Let nature take its course. That would have been easier. But I didn't. Instead, I dug into my coat pocket and pulled out the small crowbar I kept for fixing the shed door. Useless for defense, but maybe not for this. I approached slowly, speaking low. I'm not going to hurt you. I swear. Just don't kill me, all right? He didn't move. Not when I knelt beside the trap. Not when I pressed my foot on one side and wedged the bar into the other. The metal groaned. My arm strained. My fingers slipped. He let out a short, sharp breath. I grit my teeth and pushed harder. With a screech, the trap yawned open. He didn't bolt. He didn't lash out. He just lay there, chest heaving. Blood pooled under his leg. I pulled off my flannel shirt and wrapped it around the wound. Not tight, just enough to slow the bleeding. My hands were shaking. The edge of the trap had cut me, too thin, clean line across my palm. I barely felt it. We sat there for a while, just breathing. Eventually, he tried to stand. Wobbled. I stood too. He looked at me, then at the path, then back. I took a step. So did he. It was slow, clumsy. We walked like drunks in a funeral march, one step at a time through the trees. Back at the ravine's edge, I slipped. Caught myself on a root, but not before my knee slammed into a rock. Pain flared through my leg, and the world tilted sideways. I blinked. Everything was spinning. The last thing I saw was the bear lowering his head, sniffing my hand. Then darkness. Not the kind from sleep. The kind that feels like letting go. But just before I slipped under, I felt something warm and rough against my skin. A tongue, licking the cut on my hand. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. I woke to the sound of shallow breathing. Not mine. My back ached. My head throbbed. Every muscle in my body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry. I tried to move and winced. My knee had swollen overnight, stiff and burning. But I was alive. I turned my head, slowly. He was still there. The bear lay beside me, not inches away, curled slightly, like a dog resting after a long hunt. His legs still wrapped in my flannel, soaked through now with blood and mud. His chest rose and fell in rhythm. He wasn't sleeping, just watching. You stayed, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. He blinked, just once. I didn't know what to make of that. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he couldn't walk further. But something about the stillness between us felt deliberate, like neither of us wanted to be the first to leave. Eventually, I pushed myself upright, biting down a groan. The world spun but settled. We stayed like that for a while. No sounds but the rustling trees and our unsteady breathing. It wasn't peace. It was something more fragile, something closer to truce. I leaned against a tree, rested, then eventually hobbled back toward the shed. I expected him to stay behind. But when I turned, he was limping after me. No leash, no force, just following. The trip back was slow, took hours. By the time we reached the clearing, the sun was already dipping low. I collapsed on the cot the second we stepped inside. He settled on the floor again, right by the door, like a guard. Or maybe he just needed to be near another heartbeat. That night, I boiled water over a small fire in a rusted pot. I soaked a rag and cleaned his wound as gently as I could. He flinched, but didn't growl. He let me. When I was done, I sat against the wall and stared at the ceiling. Then, for the first time in nearly a year, I prayed. Not because I expected a miracle. Not because I believed someone was listening. I just didn't know what else to do. If you're out there, I don't need a sign. I don't need answers. Just let me keep waking up. That's all. The silence after felt different than usual. Less empty. The next morning, I dug out the old radio from under the shelf. It barely worked anymore, but sometimes I could catch distant transmissions. I turned the dial, wincing through the static. Then a voice. Scratchy, garbled, but clear enough. North perimeter. Missing, likely moved south with the rain. Check ridge line by Thursday. Repeat, look for signs near the ridge. Search and rescue. I sat back. They weren't looking for me. I hadn't told anyone I was here. But someone out there was missing. And others were looking for them. Somewhere, life was still happening. Later that day, I found a couple of cans I didn't remember having, beans and peaches. I ate the beans, left the peaches open on the floor. The bear sniffed them, but didn't eat. His leg was still bad, but not bleeding as much. He licked at it constantly. I tried wrapping it again. He let me. Outside, the air had shifted. You know that smell? When wood burns far off, just a whisper of smoke carried by the wind. It was faint, but I knew it. Fire. I climbed onto the overturned bucket and peered above the treetops. In the far distance, just a smudge on the horizon, I saw it. A thin line of haze, barely visible. But it was there, and moving. I climbed down and looked at him. We might have a problem. He blinked again. Maybe I was going crazy, but I felt like he understood. That night, neither of us slept. He paced in slow, labored circles. I sat by the door, flashlight in hand, listening to the forest tighten around us. Something was coming, and for once, I didn't feel ready to run. By sunrise, the air was thick with smoke. Not just the distant kind, the kind you imagine. Real, heavy, tangible. I stepped outside, and the sky wasn't blue anymore. It was gray, like the world had forgotten how to breathe. Ash floated down like snowflakes. He stood just behind me, silent. The fire was coming. I had two choices. I could leave now, alone, and probably make it out. Barely. Or I could try to save him, and risk everything. I didn't debate it long. I packed what little I had into a backpack. A canteen, the last tin of peaches, the small first aid kit. My hands were trembling. My knees still hurt like hell. But I didn't stop. I wrapped a rope around my waist. The other end looped loosely around his chest. Not tight, just enough to keep him close. "Let's go," I said. He didn't hesitate. We moved south, away from the smoke line, through the thicker woods. There was an old access road I remembered from years ago, behind the ridge. It led to a burned-out farm, abandoned since my childhood. If we made it there, maybe we could reach the gravel path that cut through to the highway. The forest was louder than usual. Birds fleeing, squirrels shrieking, distant branches snapping like bones. We moved slow. Every few steps, he stumbled. Every few steps, I did. But we moved. It took hours. Midway through, the fire cracked into view. Flames licking treetops in the far distance. The wind pushing it faster. Too fast. We kept going. Twice, I thought he might collapse. Twice, I almost did. Then we saw it. The old farm fence. Rusted, half swallowed by the earth. Beyond it, a stretch of land. Cleared, dry, but not yet touched by the blaze. I climbed over, then helped him crawl under. We collapsed on the other side, panting. "We're not safe yet," I muttered. I turned toward the barn. The walls were mostly standing. Roof half-caved, but stone foundation, solid. It could hold, maybe long enough for the fire to pass. We made it inside. He lay down. I poured what was left of the water into a bowl made from my cupped hands. He drank. Then I collapsed. I don't remember falling. I just remember fire. Heat pressing in. Walls glowing red. Smoke like a fist down my throat. I tried to crawl. I remember reaching toward the doorway. Then something grabbed my jacket. Dragged me. Hard. My back scraped against stone, dirt, roots. But I moved. Not by my own strength. I opened my eyes once. Saw fur. Saw fire behind us. Then nothing. When I woke up, the ceiling was white. Too bright. Hospital. The beeping machines confirmed it. I turned my head and saw in four. My arm wrapped in gauze. My knee immobilized. My chest bandaged. A nurse walked in. "You're awake," she said, surprised. We weren't sure. I tried to speak. My throat cracked. "We found you by the old road," she continued. "Collapsed right on the edge. If you were there 5 more minutes, well." I blinked. Tried to form words. "Someone pulled me." She frowned. There were drag marks. Deep ones. But no footprints. Just bare tracks. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Later, a ranger came by. Asked me questions. I answered what I could. No, I hadn't seen anyone else. No, I didn't know about the trap. Yes, I was alone. I lied. Only a little. After a week, they let me go. I asked them to drop me near the ridge. They thought I was crazy. I didn't argue. I walked, slower than usual, back to the clearing. Or what was left of it. Ash covered everything. The shed? Gone. But the earth remembered. Paw prints. Deep. Leading toward the south line. Recent. I climbed the hill just beyond the burn zone. And there, standing at the crest, was a shape I knew. He looked back at me. Just for a second. Our eyes met. Then he turned, slow and steady, and vanished into the trees. I stood there until the wind changed. And for the first time in a long, long while, I finally let myself cry.